I'm extremely glad to introduce the first speaker, Dr. Sangita Rayamajhi, a senior professor at the Tribhuvan University, Kathmandu, Nepal. She is the first woman in Nepal to get her PhD in English literature. She is also the recipient of many prestigious scholarships, namely the National Endowment for the Humanities, a Fulbright Scholarship, and Scholar Rescue Scholarship. So she has also authored many books. At present, she is a visiting faculty at the Asian University for Women. She's also the director of the Center for Leadership and Professional Development. And this afternoon, she will share her insights on the life and works of Parijat, who is a very well-known literary figure from Nepal. So thank you, Dr. Rajamahi. Please proceed with your lecture.
Good evening, Dr. Bina, Deputy Director, SAARC Cultural Centre, and good evening, my fellow panelists, and all those who are zooming in to be with us this evening. So, thank you very much, the SAARC Secretariat and Dr. Bina, for including me in your panel. I greatly appreciate it. So, my paper right now, I'm from Nepal, as Dr. Bina said, and right now I'm in Bangladesh, Asian University for Women in Chittagong. So I'm speaking from my office in Chittagong. Okay, so the title of my paper is Parijat, Going Beyond the Pages of Literature. So we are going to talk about the cultural landscape of the time and the women who were posited on this landscape. So we have to remember this is the 1960s Nepal. Looking at the literary history of South Asian women, that is again 1960s, we see that they are molded in a certain stereotypical fashion. They are presented or looked upon as being weak, meek, and docile. It is evident that women were denied public spaces, a forum in which to make themselves heard. They had limited power within homes and society. Yet women left behind them the impression of their presence, especially in the form of poetry and oral folk tales, or what is today documented as folk literature. The art of literary writing has been predominantly very male-centered through the years, and that tradition has continued to the present times. In the literatures written by men, women have occupied center stage, but have embodied roles where they have been relegated to the kitchen, drawing room, or bedroom as passive receivers and not as active agents of change. When women first emerged in the literary arena as writers in their respective geographical locales, they sought an identity in self-expression and resistance. Women's writings, therefore, started off only as a growing subculture. In Nepal, documented records reveal that Nepali literature, primarily poetry written by women, started in the first decades of the 19th century. Bhakti songs were written and sung only as late as 1919. Most of the regional songs in both India and Nepal draw from these Bhakti songs. Yogmaya was one such Bhakti poet, an ascetic of the late 19th century. She was a childhood widow who went to India and returned to Nepal after 30 years with her daughter. She is considered the first female activist of Nepal. Leela Luitel, one of the writers, explains how Yogmaya's feelings were depicted vividly in such songs, but were only much later written and published in a book called Sarvartha Yogbani, that is Universal Voice of Yogmaya, by her daughter Nayankala in 1933. Her themes were primarily about class and caste discrimination, the sati system, slavery, bribery, and other social perversions. She also spoke out against the administrative system prevalent at that time. Several editions of her books were burnt, During this period, other poets such as Lavanyamani Devi, Swarna Kumari Birahini, and Nalini Devi had their poems published in the newspaper Raj Bhakti. Normally, the Bhakti songs did not have much to say about the political situation within the country, instead, presenting the rich details of domestic responsibilities and the shared aspirations of women. Those songs were also the basis for much of the folk literature that was being handed down through the generations. Even though women started writing much earlier, it was only after 1950 that short stories, novels, poetry, and essays written by them began to be published and read in Nepal. Even then, women did not emerge as literary critics or playwrights until the late 20th century. There had been no documentation of any research work conducted on Nepali literature. Many female writers' works were first published in daily, weekly newspapers. When Sashikala Sharma wrote a short story called Cine Jagat, that is Film World, it was first published in the newspaper Jagrati. Similarly, Prema Shah's short story Pratikriya, which means response, in 1963, and Gita Keshri's Aparadhiko, who is the culprit, in 1966, were first published in local newspapers, Sharda and Arunodaya, respectively. Gita Keshri's short stories are primarily about issues prevalent in society, such as poverty, hunger, and family lives. That is, they are stories about social realism. Prema Shah, on the other hand, focuses on female sexuality and eroticism. Bishnu Kumari Waiba, now I'm getting to Parijat, who wrote under the pen name of Parijat, was a leading literary figure in the 60s and 70s. Two of her popular writings are her novel Sirish Ko Phool, The Blue Mimosa, and a short story Mero Na Janmiyeko Chhora, The Son Not Born to Me. Her works can be divided into two time periods for easier reference. In the earlier period of her fiction writing, she focused on nihilism, sex, and sexual perversions, while in her later works, she became more progressive and drew on Marxist philosophy. One could say her works are a landmark in the literary history of Nepal. In the immediate past of Parijat's time, literatures portrayed women at the center of the family structure, at least performing managerial roles, if not cooking, cleaning, etc. From Parijat's time to the present day, literature of and by women are narratives of self-expression, protest, defiance, and negation through explicit portrayals of the body, expressions of the body language, and language itself. Thus, women in literature have recast the roles of women in society. That is, after Parijat, or since the time of Parijat. Here I would like to draw an almost parallel similarity between Sakambari and Jane Austen's character Marian in Sense and Sensibility, which was published in 1811. And you have to remember Parijat's Sirish Ko Phool was published in 1964. The central woman character Sakambari, Abari of Sirish Ko Phool, as she is known to be a very strong-headed, confident woman who speaks up what she feels and thinks. She smokes openly. Remember, it's the 1960s. She makes fun of Suyog Bir, the guy who wants to marry her, says he's too old, as did Marian of Sense and Sensibility say of Colonel Brandon. Her stance can be a rebellion against the stereotype of women and womanhood. She dies, Sakambari, she dies denying Suyog Bir his desire of marrying her. Bari does not fit into the conventional realities of the 60s and 70s. The conventional space, you could say, or reality of 60s and 70s. And so Parijat is forced to bring an end to Bari. That smart, futuristic girl has no place in the society of that time. Similarly, more than a century before Parijat's time, Jane Austen had either to transform and subdue Marian into an image of her sister Eleanor or get rid of Marian. So Marian was expressive, showed her emotions, expressed her wishes without hesitation, made fun of Colonel Brandon who wanted to marry her, and she refused to marry him because he was too old. He was 34. Girls like Marian and Bari would never fit into their social spaces. In fact, the society, the readers would never accept such characters. While Austen transforms Marian, in the end she marries Brandon. Parijat chooses to let Bari die. Mujura in Sirish Kapoor, who is sister to Sakambari, is like Eleanor, embodying all the manifestations of the feminine. Marian, on the other hand, is Sakambari, strong, rebellious, and outspoken. Sakambari is very strong-willed. At one point, she says, I don't want to be confined within the walls of marriage. I seek freedom, not chains. Page 45. Sakambari defies societal expectations and refuses to get married. In fact, she's transcending patriarchal norms when she says, marriage is a prison for the soul, a cage for the spirit. 87. We see how Sakambari disrupts the gender norms of the Nepali society by a confident stance and exposes the constructed nature of gender expectations. When she says, I will not play the part they have written for me. I will write my own script. Page 138. In a clarion call for women writers of the time, she challenges the oppressive structures created by the intersection of gender and societal norms. Her rejection of marriage is a personal rebellion, a microcosm of a larger oppressive societal structure. Parijat was never a feminist. Her focus was on women, though. She portrays the women characters in a way she experienced them in the society. In her other works like Theory Ko Phool, Another Flower, she writes about the violence perpetrated against the female body, the alienation of the individual from the body. But my focus here is on the rebellious character able to take a decision for herself, a woman who has agency. Sirish Kapoor is definitely a critique of the societal norms, the patriarchal assumptions, and the interconnectedness between a woman and nature, which is nuanced by the title of the flower, Sirish Kapoor. Like a Sirish tree, I will bloom despite the odds. So this interconnectedness between man, woman, and nature makes me evoke another writer, a male, Visheshwar Prasad Koirala, P.P. Koirala, in his Sumniman, which was also written at the same time, 1964. Koirala celebrates the female body. He connects Sumnima's nudity with nature and earth. Sumnima is a Kirat girl, an ethnic woman. She's the epitome of nature and the natural. She's ethereal. She's like the wisp of the wind. Koirala derides the Brahmin boy Somdatta, who loves Sumnima but is besotted with his farcical rituals, which stop him from attaining happiness on earth. He thinks austerity and ritualistic life will help to get him salvation. He loves Sumnima, but is unable to get out of the shackles of patriarchal Brahmin falsity. He remains unhappy, his unrequited love a constant. This male writer has so beautifully celebrated the female body. In fact, he destabilizes the dual structures perpetrated by patriarchy, man, woman, masculine, feminine, culture, nature, and all based on hierarchical gender norms. In this, there's no subordination. It's nature and culture, masculine and the feminine, all juxtaposed. So I'm coming towards the end. Sakambari is a powerful critique of the subordination of women. Patriarchy's powerful role limits the performance of a woman. Performance, as advocated by Judith Butler, the performance of the body is what we are. But in the Kirat community, there's no subordination, no societal authority that limits the performance of Sumnima's body. But Bari's performance in Sirish Kaful is one of resilience, autonomy, dignity, and confidence in the face of systemic oppression. But both are the women of the 60s. We see how in the cultural space of the 60s and 70s, while B.P. Koirala celebrates the woman, portrays Sumnima in the image of nature and the natural. For Parijat too, the strong woman Bari is a flower which blossoms and falls according to her own will. So I quote this: it, that is the flower, births for itself, flowers for itself, and falls as if accepting that it has to die, whether it fights with the bee or not. Why should it fall being wounded by a bee? It falls for itself. It falls by its own will. So, therefore, this Bari or Sakambari is Parijat's Bari of the 1960s Nepal. Thank you. That is all.